Hi guys, Eclectic Impromptus. Happy Friday. I hope you guys had a wonderful Christmas. Mine was nice and peaceful and quiet, and yeah, I'm noticing I'm getting quite a few views on that, so that's cool. I like that. Thank you. And I know Christmas just ended, but there's a Christmas story that comes to mind, a movie adaptation, and there's like 5 million versions of this. It's The Christmas Carol, or A Christmas Carol. Sorry, I misworded there. And there's a particular scene in a few of these variations. It involves the ghost of Christmas present showing Scrooge these two emaciated little kids called Ignorance and Want. While it's a kind of a scene I don't mind watching, it's also very scary. It brings back to roughly 10 years ago. I was a personal care aide for a man who has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And every Friday I had to do the overnight shift, right? Well, I remember one time in particular, I was watching one of the versions and by chance came across that scene. And during the shift, we were allowed to sleep on the overnights as long as we were able to listen in case this gentleman needed help with something. So, yeah, after watching this scene, I couldn't sleep over there for at least a couple months, if not a little bit longer. Unless I had the bedroom light on, just because of that particular scene. I'd have those images in my head and I'd be like, ah, and would wind up having to keep the light turned on because I'd be so freaked out and stuff. Looking back on that, it was kind of funny actually. But while it does provide a good scare to those that like watching this movie, whichever version, I've seen quite a few of them, and most of them always have that scene with Ignorance and Want, those two little kids in the Ghost of Christmas Presents robe. I always like to get a good scare, and watching that scene is a surefire way to give that to me. However, on a serious note, I've done a little research about this particular scene and those two scraggly little urchins, and there's a lesson with this. So, we have, a lot of poor people living in poverty, and not in all cases it's their fault. Things happen. But, if you're choosing to live in ignorance and you're not able to provide for yourself, it could lead to living in poverty and being destitute. That's not everybody's fault that's in this situation. I'm not saying that. I want to clarify that. But there's some, if you're living in ignorance, this is what's going to happen. But then you got those that are able to provide themselves. They're not educating the poor to better themselves so they can provide for themselves. So they're not in a needy position anymore. It's a good idea to be mindful of that and to help out when you can. I mean, I understand we all can't. We all have lives, and we gotta be able to take care of ourselves first before we take care of others. I totally understand. Excuse me. I could totally understand that, but fact of the matter is, there's a saying: you fish for a man, he eats for a day. You teach a man how to fish, he eats for life. It's kind of a similar concept, and I also remember in the story, ignorance was the worst of the two evils. If you're ignorant, you're breeding want, right? So, it's good to be mindful of that, be able to provide for yourself, and to help those that are less fortunate to be able to do this. And during this time, with this story, it was more towards the Victorian era, so it seemed to be more of definitely a concern back then, and it was being taught through that story, and I think it applies to real life and stuff. I mean, there's people that don't want to work, you can't force them, but it leads to consequences of being needy and living in poverty and stuff. But then there's some, if, it's kind of like there's extenuating circumstances also, and if you can't work, you can't work, but, if you can, you should, so you can provide for yourself and your families and, break that generational cycle, so to speak. So yeah, that kind of came to mind. That and humorous, getting a good scare every now and then kind of was on my mind a little bit earlier. But yeah, I thought I'd share some words of wisdom in regards to helping the poor, and you know, if the poor is able to help themselves get out of that cycle, that's awesome and stuff. So, um, excuse me, sorry about that. If you like this video, feel free to click like, subscribe, and share. And hopefully that'll that this for food for thought, and see what happens from there, I guess. All right, have a good evening, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye bye.